Hello, welcome to Why Wait Till Sunday. It is Thursday. I am your host, Alfred, and we are here to go over the week 15, I believe it is, slate. So it's not bowl season yet, but we've got conference championship games. And I think we have some makeup games for regular season for some teams that didn't make their conference championship. And this week's slate is Texas A&M at Tennessee, Northwestern at Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship, Oklahoma at Iowa State in the Big 12 Championship, FSU at Wake Forest in the Toilet Bowl Championship, but it is a game that will be played. Washington State at Utah, Louisiana at College of Charleston in the Sun Belt Championship, Ole Miss at LSU, Missouri at Mississippi State, Clemson at Notre Dame in the ACC Championship, Minnesota at Wisconsin, and then Boise State at San Jose State in the Mountain West Championship game. So as usual, we are going to go and talk about the teams with the highest team total on the slate first. Those are going to be where we're probably going to want to focus our attention. We have Ole Miss at LSU, and this game has an absolutely ridiculous total of 78.5. I'm not sure I can recall a total higher. That's like a basketball total. And it's also a close spread, only 2.5 points. Ole Miss is favored, and so their projected team total is 39. LSU sits at 37, so that game projects to go 37-39. We could very easily have 35-35, 38-38, 42-42, go to overtime. I mean, this game, the next closest total, I think, is 12 points. 13 points, basically, which is 2 touchdowns higher than the next closest game. I mean, it's almost silly that they even put it on the slate because it's just so clearly a game that you cannot fade. Ohio State projected for 38, which actually feels like a lot against Northwestern's very good defense. But Ohio State obviously is an elite offense, and they are not projected by Vegas to struggle very much at all. Wake Forest comes in at 36, Clemson at 35 against Notre Dame, Utah 34 against Washington State, Oklahoma 31 against Iowa State, Boise State 31, FSU 30, Wisconsin 30, and Coastal Carolina 29 points projected. And, well, looks like I missed one that should have been in there, which is Texas A&M projected to score about 33 against Tennessee's pretty soft defense there. So that's a nice number. They're favored by 14, and they come in at about the 6th highest total on the slate. We're really going to touch on the players I like on first glance here. Things do change throughout the week. We get information on, COVID tests or, injuries, or just from other information. I mean, there's a lot of other good people out there doing college DFS content. And so, I'm not above listening to other people, getting another perspective, and certainly things do change throughout the week. This is a very first look. The slate was just released today with salaries for the players. And, I do have a process here, but certainly can learn throughout the week and, follow on Twitter. That's where I'll tweet out, something new that I found, or, hey, I'm getting on this guy, I'm getting off that guy, etc. And we can also have a nice conversation. This is meant to be interactive, and, we're all in this together trying to, bink one of these tournaments. So, quarterback, you've got Justin Fields. He's incredible. He's 9,800 most expensive quarterback, and the matchup couldn't really get any worse. So the question you have to ask yourself is, do I believe that Fields in Ohio State is so much better than anybody they could possibly throw at them? Because Northwestern checks in as really the best defense on the slate. I mean, the fewest yards per play, the second or third fewest yards per rush allowed. Even in their passing game, they are down at the fewest yards per attempt allowed. They are allowing 14.6 points per game. I mean, that is they are difficult. So, you're asking yourself, is the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft and his supporting cast good enough to overcome that? Probably. I mean, they're favored and they're projected to score 38 points. So almost 3 times what their average given up is. Gosh, do you really want to pay the elite premium price for the worst matchup? I don't know. I really don't think so. I mean, I don't see how you can pay up for Fields given the matchup. I mean, there's a lot of other quarterbacks you can say will get you, have a decent chance of getting you 3 touchdowns. You're not paying 9,800 for. Moving on to Matt Corral, 9,700, and I mean, he should be he should be 10,000. Like, I don't see how he's not 12,000, and he might still be worth it in this game against LSU, who's, I know they have Stingley, who's supposed to be very good. I mean, he's like an NFL prospect cornerback, but they are absolutely atrocious. And what's more surprising is that they are actually worse against the pass. I mean, they can stop the run, but they are horrific against the pass. And this is now 10 games into the SEC season. Yes, they did have to play Bama, but they've also played Arkansas. They've also played Auburn. The fact that they're giving up the most yards per attempt on the slate by over a yard, I mean, it's just nuts. They are horrible. And, they haven't even played, the best teams. They played Florida, but who else from the East is an offensive juggernaut? So we're saying Ole Miss and Matt Corral, wow. I mean, this is nuts. This is absolutely insane. And if this matchup happens in the NFL, I feel like the contrarian, it's like fade that chalk. It's too obvious. But this is college, where I think that kind of thing does not go inverted too often. I mean, when it looks like it's going to be insane, it's going to be insane, especially in a regular season game where, this isn't an island game, bowl game, championship game where these teams have had all year, 3 weeks to work up to it. Like, this is just a regular season game, and these teams are going to not have any fancy packages. They're just going to play their brand of football. All that to say, I don't see how you fade Matt Corral at 9,700. I mean, 500 yards is in the range of outcomes, and I am not even saying hyperbole. I don't see how he's not the most expensive quarterback. He even does chip in on the ground a little bit. It's just, you can't possibly do it. You have to do it. I wouldn't get too cute. Unless you were trying to go contrarian, tournament lineups, sure, anything's in play for those types of things. Grayson McCall just was really, really good last week and the week before against BYU. And he has delivered lately, and probably going to be fairly popular at 8,200. The Louisiana defense, which is who they're going to go up against, is actually a little bit difficult. They do not allow much through the air at all. 5.5 yards per attempt allowed by the Louisiana defense. That's very low. Bottom 3 on the slate. A little bit more generous on the ground. They allow 42 rushes per game at a 4.2 yard clip. Even that is not, relatively speaking, it is a little bit better than what they're allowing through the air. But in fact, this team has one of the smallest margins between what they allow through the air and what they allow as a total defense. And so, they don't even set up, like, it's not even necessarily beneficial to pass on them. I mean, if anything, you might want to run on them. So, but even that is a little bit of a stingy run defense. So I think it's kind of just might be a bit of an ugly game. 8,200, not a terrible price, but I think we can do better with some of these extremely soft matchups. So let's move on. Jordan Travis, 7,200. He's up a little bit from last week when he went really wild against Duke. Granted, it was Duke, but we have Wake Forest this week, which honestly is not that much better than Duke on defense. They're real bad, and their offense is very fast-paced, which is what we like to see. I'd be fine firing up Jordan Travis again. 7,200. I think he had 100 on the ground last week, or 90, very close to it. He's going to give you a 200 to 250 through the air. I mean, this guy's not going to hit the 300 bonus, but he may hit the 100 bonus on the ground. And it's a nice discount. The offense is just going to run the ball. They're either going to run it with Travis, they're going to run it with Corbin, and that's really, they have almost no passing chops to speak of. it should be. I mean, that should be a great game for offense. No problem with Jordan Travis. But then we have Sam Hartman for 6,900, so he's 300 less. FSU's defense is worse than Wake Forest's, which isn't saying much, but FSU's defense freaking stinks. 6.5 yards per play on the season, and that's after they just had a pretty good outing against Duke. Before that, they were even worse last week when I looked at it. 5.1 yards per attempt on the ground. They're awful. I mean, they're awful. So why not? I mean, take the 300 savings. You don't get quite as much of that, ground game bump for the quarterback with Sam Hartman, but he's gonna run a little bit. He can certainly get in. They'll sneak him in. He has a couple rushing touchdowns on the season, but he's probably going to get to 300 yards in this game. I'd be surprised if he didn't. This is going to be an offensive showcase. I'd take the discount probably and go Hartman, unless you stack the whole game and go Travis and Hartman. No problem with that either. And then you have Max Johnson, the newly minted LSU starter. This is just back to this LSU Ole Miss game. Max Johnson just beat Florida. He looked pretty good doing it. I watched the entire game. He's not going to blow you away. He had some nice touch on his passes. He actually chipped in a little bit on the ground too, which is kind of nice. I'm not sure that's 100% of his game, but he's very functional. He has looked pretty good all year. They kept running TJ Finley out there, but I think finally just said, Max Johnson he's earned it. And I think he really did. He's functional. And this is I'd start my 5-year-old son against Ole Miss, I think. So I have no problem at all. I think you can go, Max Johnson and Corral. I mean, any of the four, Corral, Travis, Hartman, Johnson, you're paying up for Corral, but the other guys all look good too. These are games that they should just be back and forth, loosey-goosey, which is really what you want. The only other one of note would be Jake Bentley for Utah. And this is a matchup-based thing. Utah's total is 34. That's not bad. They do like to run the ball. Washington State's defense is better to attack through the air. They're very generous, allowing 37 pass attempts per game and 8 yards per attempt. Pretty nice. Over 300 yards per game allowed. A little more stingy on the ground. It could be a function of when you're playing Washington State, you're probably needing to score a lot. But yeah, he's only 6,000. He's had a nice season. Utah's only played 4 games. The Pac-10 has had a lot of issues with COVID. They started late, et cetera, et cetera. He's functional, like Mac Johnson. Transfer from South Carolina, I believe, and I really don't have a problem with Bentley for Utah with a nice team total and $6,000. I mean, if you need a little extra savings, I wouldn't hate Jake Bentley. Now this isn't an offense that's going to want to press the issue through the air, but the matchup is pretty favorable. I think you could do worse. Again, probably not like a safe cash game type play. He will be unpopular. I do not see people saying Jake Bentley is the smash play of the week, but that is a sneaky, cheap QB in a good matchup against an offense that will need to score. I kind of like that. I think some tournaments are going to have Bentley in them. Going to running back. There's quite a bit of running backs that I like a lot on the slate. There's some injuries and some other issues that are opening up really extreme value, I think. We're going to have to watch some of this throughout the week. Of course, we're going to go over the big names at the top. Some of them I am pretty happy to fade. You've got Ibrahim at 9,000 for Minnesota against Wisconsin. No way. I mean, why are you going to do that? I don't care. You can get 40 carries. I'm not going to pay 9,000 against the Wisconsin defense. Breece Hall is just amazing. I love this guy. He is my number one running back in the 2022 class. He is 8,500. That's really not too bad. Matchup's not great. Oklahoma was a bit of a pushover earlier in the season. They have righted the ship. They only allow 3 yards per carry, only allow 29 carries against per game. They're pretty good. they've really gotten better, especially against the run. Breece Hall ran for well over 100 yards in their first meeting. It will be interesting to see what happens this week. I'm not sure I want to do 8,500. I mean, I think, again, you don't want to completely fade Breece Hall. If you're running out a bunch of lineups, I wouldn't just ignore him. He's always capable of 150 and 3 touchdowns. CJ Marable, 8,300. Yeah, I wouldn't hate it. He's just very involved in the offense. Like McCall, I mean, really, those two guys are going to score almost all of their touchdowns. All these running backs at the top, I really feel like we can get some similar expected production and spend almost $1,000 less. Travis Etienne, 7,800. And this feels really cheap for Etienne. In a game, they're going to need to use him the entire game. Big time matchup with Notre Dame. And they played before. Granted, DJU was the quarterback, not Lawrence. He had 18 carries, only 28 yards. He did get in the zone, but he had 8 receptions for 57 yards. I mean, if he plays a whole game and you're going to tell me Etienne's going to get 25 touches, 26, 7 touches, in games he's had to play most of the game against like Boston College, he had 27 touches, had 20 carries and 7 receptions. I think this could be very sneaky. They're going to see Etienne in a bad matchup. He's still the 5th most expensive guy, so it's not like he's like way down the list or something like that. And Notre Dame stopped him last time, 28 yards. They may not even consider the receptions potential. This should be a big game. Clemson needs to win. Lawrence is back. Oh, man. I think this could be a real interesting play. At 7,800, you're kind of paying up to be contrarian potentially. And he's an elite talent, and he can absolutely break off 60-plus yards anytime. And I think, stands to reason. Clemson's going to come in with a little bit of the old chip on the shoulder, pay up for an elite talent at a discount in what should be a bad matchup. But you're not paying 8,500 for Hall's bad matchup. You're not paying 9,000 for Ibrahim's bad matchup. You're paying 7,800 for a bad matchup, but he gets so much work in the passing game. He doesn't have to run for 100 yards. Wow, that's real interesting. I wasn't, planning to get on here and really pump up Etienne, but I just kind of think that could be some leverage there to get an absolutely elite player under the radar this week. Okay. Kyren Williams for 7,500. See, this is a little bit of the opposite. I mean, I don't like him against Clemson. Clemson's got an excellent defense, specifically very good against the run, 2.9 yards per carry allowed. When they played before at Notre Dame, Kyren Williams went absolutely ham. 23 rushes, 140 yards, 3 dadgum touchdowns. People are going to see that and be like, why is Kyren Williams less than Etienne? I'm going to play Kyren Williams again. I think this could be an important pivot this week. Kyren Williams is a great player. I really like him. He has impressed a ton this year. And he is way on the NFL map. I've played him a lot. I think this could be a spot to avoid him. This is very interesting to me. I do not think, Notre Dame has had some difficulty against good run defenses. Pittsburgh, he was 17 for 38 with only a 2.2 yards per carry average. I know that's just one game. Boston College, 9 for 37 with only 4.1 average, well below his season average. The only defense that they smoked was Clemson. And, the only good defense, I should say, that they smoked is Clemson. I think that game feels like it was an anomaly in a lot of ways. I just don't think history is going to repeat itself with the entire game flow and everything about it. I do not really want to play Kyren Williams this week. Put it on my tombstone. Jarian Ealy is at 7,300. Don't really love him, even though that game is incredible. Isaiah Spiller's $200 less against pretty crappy Tennessee defense. and Spiller's going to get 20 touches, 25 touches. Ely is probably not. So then we are on Isaiah Spiller. Tennessee's run defense, I guess, is pretty good. I mean, they check out, only 3.6 yards per attempt, but they allow 37 rushing attempts per game. They're pretty bad through the air. I mean, they're not a very good defense. Certainly bottom in the NCAA. Maybe better to attack through the air, but Texas A&M wants to run the ball. Spiller's really, really good. I wouldn't have a problem with him. I also wouldn't have a problem with Ty Jordan for Utah. He's $7,000. This feels like a really low price. I mean, I think he's potentially a top 5 back on the slate, and he's coming in, maybe RB10 or so cost wise. Definitely the feature back for Utah. Washington State, as we've already talked about, is pretty bad through the air, but it doesn't mean you're not going to run the ball. And if you're throwing, that means you're getting closer to the end zone. You get a PI in the end zone, you're going to get the ball on the 1 yard line, things like that. So, I don't shy away if a team is better through the air. I actually like that even for the ground game, because then maybe you get up through the air and then you run the ball or whatever. I mean, you just want yards, you want chunks, you want to be advancing the ball down the field. And, a running back will benefit from that similarly. And so I really like Ty Jordan at $7,000. He's a true freshman. He's jumping up people's boards. He is an interesting player. Listed 5'7", 200 pounds. So he is short and thick. Utah's only played 4 games, but in those 4 games, he was pretty lackluster against Southern Cal. And he had 10 for 97 against Washington with 4 receptions. They fed him against Oregon State, 27 for 167, 2 on the ground, 2 receptions for 22 yards. And then against Colorado, 17 for 147 and 2 touchdowns, and caught 2 passes. So this guy, I think you can pretty much expect 20 carries roughly, and, 2 to 3 receptions. He's kind of become their guy. He's definitely the feature. And, for $7,000, see, that's why I think some of these guys for like $7,000, Spiller and Jordan, I feel great about them. Why am I going to spend up for some of these other players? Jashaun Corbin for FSU, he's at 6,100. I had him a ton last week. He totally smashed, only 76 yards, but 3 touchdowns against Duke. We have Wake Forest this week. Their other running back, one of them opted out. So he's the guy. The only, he just has to split time with Jordan Travis. But other than that, he's the guy. And there's no problem there. 6,100. He's a little more expensive than last week. I think he was 55 last week. But yeah, that's a nice number. That's a nice matchup. Then we have Christian Beal-Smith for Wake Forest on the other sideline from Corbin. And he might be the discount of the entire week. So he really hurt some people last week, myself included. Only had 7.2 DraftKings points in what should have been a great matchup against Louisville. He only had 14 carries. He caught 1 ball, but that's not really, receiving is not really his game. And he was 6,600 and a fairly popular play. He comes in this week at 5,900 off the dud against FSU. If I haven't said it enough, FSU's defense is atrocious. And Wake Forest is favored. I just think this, if you're a smart player, I think you just jump on this. You're getting a huge discount. 6,600 all the way down to 5,900. So last week against Louisville, they really got jumped. It was 21-10 at halftime. I think it got to be in the third quarter, it got to be 28-10 because Louisville scored first in the third quarter. So, in the third quarter is 28-10. I don't think they could run the ball the way that they want to. And so Beal-Smith ended up with 14 carries, but, I think FSU is not going to do that to them. They are going to be able to control the ball a little bit more, should be more back and forth, not lopsided. I think we can expect upwards of 20 carries from Beal-Smith if they control this game. He had 19 against Syracuse. He had 17 for 120 against North Carolina in what was an incredible shootout game. This feels like a prime opportunity to jump on Beal Smith for only 5,900. I don't see how I'm going to avoid it unless some of these, we're going to talk about some other fairly extreme values open up. But even so, I think Beal Smith is an absolutely great play at 5,900 with not a lot of competition in the backfield against just god-awful FSU. Then we've got Jalen Berger, who's 5,000. Wisconsin's pretty studly freshman running back. They get Minnesota, and I would play that absolutely all day long, except for Berger missed last week. I'm not sure if he's like confirmed out already this week, so we have to pay attention to that. On a related note, his teammate, Nakia Watson, is 3,600. In relief last week, he had 13 carries, only 29 yards. He did get in the end zone for 1 touchdown against Iowa. But this should be a totally different game for Wisconsin against the Minnesota defense. Minnesota actually has the worst yards allowed per rush attempt at 6.6, which is just laughable, even a yard more than horrific Ole Miss. That's really something. And I think that is a beautiful. I mean, if Berger's active, we get good reports. I mean, 5,000 for him, kind of a slam dunk. If Watson is going to get 15 carries against that defense at 3,600, I mean, I don't see how you don't play him. That's going to open up a world of other possibilities. And then we get to the LSU backfield again against Ole Miss. You want to get a piece of this. This is a cheap way to do it. John Emery Jr. is 4,700, and they're splitting time between 3 guys this year. Emery, you've got Tyrion David Price, 4,500. He was out. I think he might be out this week. He looked to injure himself pretty bad. And then Emery's banged up. He injured his shoulder against Florida, and so that brought us to Chris Curry, who had in the teens carries against Florida, and he's not that impressive. I mean, he's definitely been the 3rd guy this year. I think started camp as the incumbent starter. I think he's an older guy, but he's been pretty whatever all year. But again, against Ole Miss, you're going to play pretty much anybody. And if you're telling me, I mean, he got like 17 carries against Florida. So if Emery and David Price are out, Curry stands to get, against like Watson, I mean, 15, 20 carries against this Ole Miss defense. And I'm all in on that. I mean, there's a decent chance you can roll out Curry and Watson for a total of 7,800 and expect 15 to 20 carries from each guy. That's nuts. That is absolutely bonkers. So, I mean, if we can do that, we can just spend cash everywhere else. And I don't see why you would pay up for some of those other running backs. Even the guys I said I liked, if this opens up and you've got Curry as a starter with no competition, and you've got Berger out and Watson starting against flipping Minnesota, you play those guys and then you just pay up for receiver and quarterback. I mean, that's, you kind of have to do that, even though there are other guys I really like. Those prices are so cheap. I mean, all you need is 60 yards and a touchdown to get like 4X, 3X, 4X, 60 yards and a touchdown, but you're going to get more than that probably. All right. Receivers, you've got Eli Moore, 9,900. He's awesome. 10 catches is almost his floor, which is just insane. It's against LSU. It's the matchup to dream of. I mean, this is just absolutely it. 200 yards is definitely in the range of outcomes. 3 touchdowns, you name it. I mean, give me the over-under of anything, and I'll probably pick the over. 9,900 is a lot, but he's still 100 less than Devonta Smith was last week at 10K. I think that's not even a bad price. I mean, 9,900 for a guy like Moore, what he's going to do in the matchup that he's in, you got to find a way probably. I was really in on the next guy, Khalil Shakir, for Boise State. Now, this is a really interesting dude. He is a junior, a true junior. He technically actually, by a lot of definitions, broke out as a sophomore last year, getting over 20% of his team's receiving production. and has absolutely smashed this year and is flying very under the radar, even though Boise State's, pretty well-known program, but he's got 40% of their receiving market share this year. In addition to that, he's chipped in 16 rushes. So they use him in multiple ways. He is a multi-dimensional guy. Doing research for this slate, I'll be honest, I hadn't really heard of him, but I think if you're watching this and you're a Devy player, if you're even a dynasty player, put this guy on your list. Boise's projected for 31, and this guy just gets everything. If Boise State even kind of has success through the air, it's gonna go through him. He's got multiple games with 10 catches. He's got 3 or 4 games in the season with 100 yards. I mean, he's just their guy, and I really like that. I mean, see, Moore is that guy in a ridiculous matchup, and he's 9,900. It's worth it. Shakir's that guy in a not as great matchup, but still, you want these receivers where you can bank on them being all of their team's production. That's what Shakir is. I got to look into this guy more, beyond even just this week's slate. Very excited to do that, but remember that name, and I will be playing a lot of him this week. You have the Ohio State duo, 8,000 and 7,300 for Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, respectively. Again, we talked about the matchup. That's really difficult. It's just hard not to play players from these pinball games at a discount compared to, like the Ohio State premium prices. You got your Washington State players. I'll be honest, I've not really followed Washington State too much this year. We have this real talk. Harris is 7,100. He's their main receiver. Then you got Bell, 6,400. Utah traditionally does have a pretty good defense. Looks that way again this year. They allow 37 pass attempts per game, which is actually, pretty high on the slate, but only 6.7 yards per attempt. Really tough on the ground. 25 points per game allowed for Utah in their 4 games. I guess I'll be honest, I don't really know what to expect out of Washington State. I've seen a little bit about their quarterback. I think he's having a pretty good season, but I don't think this is an ideal matchup. There's some other guys that, like, the games are just going to go out of control. If you have to just default to Vegas, they think Washington State only scores 23 points. Of course, these guys in that offense are going to catch a lot of passes, but, so is Jakari Robinson, who's 7K, so 100 less than Washington State's Harris. And with Sage Surratt opting out and Devon Green, who was just not really the alpha anyway, and now he's looking doubtful for this game. I mean, Roberson is by far and away the only guy on Wake Forest that they should bother to really throw to. And he has really come through of late. 4 out of his last 5 games, he's gone over 100 yards, 7 catches, 6 catches, 7 catches, 12 catches, 9 catches. He's scored in his last 3 games. He's been great. He's making himself some money. He is a junior this year, and he is making himself some money. And he is, there's no reason to think he's not going to continue to put up these numbers against FSU. Everybody puts up numbers. I mean, I think he's almost a smash play. Like, how do you not do that? I mean, I love going more Shakir Roberson because you're just getting the absolute alpha in their offense. You don't have the Garrett Wilson and Olave coin flip. You don't have some of these other guys where it could be either one. I mean, these offenses are running through those receivers. And so in the interest of time, we're going to bump down. I mean, there's a lot of receivers I've got listed here, but none of them really stand out to me in terms of matchup or price until we get down to another guy. You kind of got to smash Keyshawn Boutte for LSU. He is up from his price tag last week. This guy was a 5-star recruit. He is tracking to be a stud. LSU is a wide receiver factory. Let's see. Jamar Chase opted out. Terrence Marshall opted out. Racey McMath, who was kind of an upperclassman, he has been injured and probably remains injured. Keyshawn Boutte is a stud prospect. He has gone over 100 yards now in back-to-back games since Terrace Marshall opted out. He has gone up a little bit in price. I think was 4,500 last week. So yeah, they did jack him up 1,200 to 5,700, but he's still 5,700. He should absolutely be in the sevens. No doubt in my mind. Write it down in ink. He should be in the sevens. He's sitting at 5,700 in this freaking game against Ole Miss. What are you doing, DraftKings? I mean, this you play him. You have to play. Okay, there's a couple of guys you absolutely have to play this week. Keyshawn Boutte, one of the guys from Ole Miss, even if you don't do both, Moore and Corral, and Watson if Berger's out, and Curry if the rest of the backfield is out. You have to play those players. Cost, matchup, production, volume, it is all there. Boutte, 5,700. Do not think about it. Lock it in. You did the right thing. Even if he goes 0 for 0 for 0 and not even has a reception or even an injury to blame it on, you still did the right thing. You have to play him. 5,700. Write it down. Okay. Then we have an interesting guy, and we're getting into sub 5,000. Always have to find some of these guys, even though, we've got actually some of these guys in the running backs, which is unusual this week. So we may not have to dip down so far into the wide receivers at this cost. But McGowan for Northwestern, he's kind of tied to being their leading receiver. He's only scored one touchdown this year, and it was on a rush. But that's the interesting thing about him. He's tied with Chacao Bowman for receptions, or within a couple receptions of each other. But McGowan gets these rush attempts, which is kind of nice at 4,800. And Northwestern's gonna need to score. It's Ohio State's, especially their pass defense, is interestingly not that great. I mean, I know they have a really good corner in Wade, I believe is his name. But Ohio State is really middle of the slate in terms of yards per attempt allowed at 7.2. They are very high on the slate in terms of pass attempts allowed. And that makes perfect sense. You play Ohio State, you are not going to be able to control the ball and run the ball all game long. They're eventually going to start scoring in bunches, and you're going to have to keep up. So Northwestern is going to be forced out of their comfort zone and need to throw the ball. So I think some of the receivers at these cheap prices, McGowan at 4,800, and then I also mentioned Chacao Bowman, I believe is how you pronounce it. Forgive me. Is 4,400. They are easily the top two receivers on Northwestern, and I think you could certainly dumpster dive there just because of the matchup, just because they're going to have to force the issue, even if they don't really want to as a team. I don't think that's really their identity. But Peyton Ramsey's a good quarterback. He can do it. He can. I think he can support one of these guys. They're both, can be expected somewhere between 5 and 8 catches. Chacao Bowman has been more consistent on the receptions, but McGowan, he can catch 5 to 8 balls, but also will get some rush attempts, which I like the dynamic. All that is a little extra. It's a little something. You're going to get 2 rushing attempts. Maybe one gets broken off. So I like that. And they're sub 5,000, which is a nice price. I think certainly worth a one-off if you need, if you're scrolling through, you need something around that 4,000, 4,500 price range. I think one of those guys is certainly worth looking at. Dontario Drummond for Ole Miss. He is a senior having a pretty nondescript season, but of late he has actually kind of come on. I mean, he was like 1 reception earlier. The last 3 games, 4 for 29, 4 for 46, 2 for 84. He has scored in 3 straight games. So he's coming on a little bit. He's only 4,400. And like I said, over and over and over again, this game has all the potential in the world to be everything you've ever wanted it to be. It could go over 100 points total. There could be like 10 passing touchdowns in this game between the two teams. So getting a piece of that at 4,400 feels like a pretty good deal. If you can't get Corral and Moore in your lineup, Drummond is certainly not a household name. He's not, he's recently kind of come on with a little bit more usage. I think you could do worse than, Hail Mary there at 4,400 in that game specifically. On a similar note, we've got some backup kind of third, fourth string guys on LSU. Jaray Jenkins at 4,300 and Coy Moore at 3,500. These are guys that are catching passes lately because of all the opt-outs and all that. Boutte is the stud, but these guys will, they'll trickle in. They'll have some stuff. I think Jenkins caught a touchdown against Gators. Coy Moore had a couple receptions, but 3,500 in that game. Again, you're going very cheap in a game that anything could happen. And then we have Morin for Wake Forest. I like this game. We've already talked about it a lot. He would slide in as the second receiver behind with Devin Green doubtful. And at 4,200, I can get behind that for sure. We love Roberson, but if you want to say, well, what if FSU somehow cobbles together, bracket coverage or something like that and stops Roberson, well, then Morin's going to be in play and could be a sneaky guy to see targets funneled to him. So I know it was heavy on FSU, Wake Forest, LSU, Ole Miss, but I'd be foolish if those weren't the games. I was going to look at deeply and really especially try to mine value from those games. Hope I gave you a couple other names. I think the Northwestern receivers could be a little bit sneaky. And last week was fun. We did kind of this like ultimate stars and scrubs. We did a full Bama stack, which didn't end up panning out very well, but seemed like a good idea at the time. We're going to do this live on air because that's how it's fun. So yeah, we're going to do this ultimate stars and scrubs type situation. So of course we have got to have Matt Corral. Of course we have got to have Eli Moore. Of course we have to have Shakir. So we've got the top two receivers in Matt Corral. Of course we're going to have Boutte. So that is my favorite receivers. The guy who didn't make the cut is Roberson because of price. We're going to go super cheap at running back, assuming the value opens up. Chris Curry and Nakia Watson. And that leaves us with about, I think it's about 8,800 looks like. And so we're going to, about 4,400 per player. And that identifies then Drummond. So now we have a three-way stack with Corral, Eli Moore, and Drummond from that game, plus Chris Curry, plus Boutte. So we got 5 players from that game, and I don't think that's unreasonable. And then, a very intriguing guy, Chacao Bowman, for Northwestern. And I think that's a pretty interesting, sneaky one, because people are going to stack this game. If Berger's out, I do think Watson will become pretty popular. If the other LSU running backs are going to become pretty popular, Chris Curry, people are going to be rostering all these players from Ole Miss and LSU. You could be a little different with Drummond. I think the Northwestern guys, whether it's Chacao Bowman or McGowan, is a way to be different. I think potentially Shakir. I think people who stack that LSU Ole Miss game probably don't pay up for Shakir, but get him in there. And this has a really, really high ceiling lineup. I think that is certainly something I will play, especially, obviously we have to get the Curry and Watson green light. Davis Price seems like he's out, just reading the tea leaves right now. So, if it's Chris Curry, great. But if Davis Price is out and Emory plays, I'd find a way to get Emory in. Now, obviously, that's not this super duper cheap $4,100 option. He's $4,700, so he's a little bit more expensive than Curry. You can't do this lineup and slide Emory in. That's not an immediate pivot. So you'd have to rethink things, and I definitely, you can't play Curry obviously if Emory's active. So you'd have to rethink some things. But if this opens up, I really like this lineup. I mean, you are stacking some premium receivers, the best quarterback on the slate, I think. And then some spot starts for running back who that'll work. I mean, we know that. Look, what was it, 2, 3, 4 weeks ago? On Saturday morning, all of a sudden, Hubbard was out for Oklahoma State. Their LD Brown was out for Oklahoma State. Their third string running back was some $3,300 guy, Desmond Jackson. And he ended up only being, I think, 15 to 20% rostered because kind of the news all came out Saturday morning right before kickoff. It was a noon game. And he went for like over 200 yards. I mean, it really doesn't matter, especially, look, these matchups are horrific. Mississippi, Minnesota, these are awful, awful run defenses. I don't really care who the name is or the price of these guys. Because these matchups are perfect and they are a kind of last man standing situation, I think, where they could get 15 carries, I think, pretty easily. Wisconsin got jumped by Iowa last week, and so they couldn't rely on the run the way that they want to. And so they only ran 13 times. But if they had their, the way that they want things to go, it would have been, 15 carries should not be a problem for Watson, especially against Minnesota. So I really like that. That's a fun lineup to do. Hopefully that value opens up for us. It'll be pretty popular, so we're going to have to pick some of these other guys to be different. And that will do it for us in week 15. Subscribe to the channel. We're going to keep going through bowl season. I have some stuff lined up for the off season. Obviously, we won't be doing DFS lineups, but we're going to kind of switch gears, talk a little bit more about, the college game, some depth charts. I'm going to have guests on who know their own personal favorite teams really, really well. We're going to go through the depth chart, look forward to next season. We're going to talk in terms of kind of Devy, Dynasty, all the good stuff about college football and, for the game in and of itself, and then also looking forward with an eye on the NFL, because I think most of us who are doing this also do either dabble or play a lot of NFL fantasy and even NFL DFS, and all knowledge is power. So we do want to just talk about this. We want to know about it. We want to know about these players. And so that's what we're going to do in the off season. So subscribe. There's more good stuff coming. Follow me on Twitter at AL_FF_RED. Sorry about the underscores, folks. And like, comment, subscribe, all that. I am going to see you next week.